Filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Have you ever looked back at old photos from just a few years ago and thought, why did we ever think that was attractive? Beauty trends move fast, but sometimes they don't just change, they completely reject what came before. Right now we're watching one of those dramatic shifts unfold. On one side, we have the hyper-polished clean girl aesthetic, slick back buns, sculpted cheekbones, and quiet luxury. Perfection is the goal. But on the other side, something unexpected is happening. Ugly pretty is taking over, bleached eyebrows, grungy eyeliner, unkempt hair, and an almost awkward approach to beauty. Aesthetics rules are being rewritten, and for the first time in a long time, looking too perfect is starting to feel outdated. But this isn't the first time we've seen beauty go to war with itself. Every few decades, society turns against its own beauty ideals. In the 1920s, flappers chopped off their long hair and ditched corsets to rebel against hyper-feminine beauty of the Victorian era. In the 1990s, the curvy, polished supermodels of the 80s were replaced by the heroin chic, gaunt, ghostly, and deliberately unpolished. And today, we're living through yet another extreme shift, where aesthetic rebellion is the new standard. But why does this happen? Why does beauty go from one extreme to the other? And what does this say about the social, economic, and political forces shaping our world? Today we're diving deep into the pendulum swings of beauty, uncovering why our idea of attractiveness is always in flux, and why sometimes we decide to make beauty ugly on purpose. Okay, let's talk about something that has completely changed my skincare routine. You know how we're all looking for that glowy, smooth, flawless skin, but without the expensive treatments? I found something that actually works. This is the FAQ 202 by Foreo, the next generation of LED face mask. If you haven't tried LED therapy yet, you're seriously missing out. It's ultra lightweight, totally wireless, and designed with flexible silicone that molds to your face for even light coverage. No slipping, no discomfort, just pure skincare benefits. It comes with 8 different LED wavelengths, including NIR, which means it helps with everything: fine lines, uneven skin tone, redness, and even stubborn sunspots. And after just a few weeks of using it, my skin is brighter, smoother, and plumper. It's like having a professional facial at home, but without the insane price tag. And because I want you to experience these results too, Foreo is offering 30% off not just on the FAQ 202, but all of their products when using my code LauraJane30. Just click the link in my description and use my code LauraJane30 for the extra discount, even on already marked down items. Trust me, your skin will thank you. Check it out and let me know in the comments if you love it as much as I do. Alright, let's jump right back into the main video. Chapter 1, the 1920s Flapper Rebellion, destroying the Victorian ideal. For centuries, beauty was synonymous with hyper-femininity, a reflection of rigid social structures that dictated a woman's role. From the powdered faces and delicate curls of the 18th century to the tightly cinched corset of the 19th century, beauty ideals revolved around delicacy, control, and ornamentation. Victorian women in particular were expected to maintain long, flowing hair, a symbol of modesty and virtue, often styled in elaborate updos that signified grace and restraint. Their hourglass figures were exaggerated with corsets, which, though considered a mark of beauty, also served as a physical limitation, reinforcing the idea that women were fragile, passive beings meant to exist within the domestic sphere. Pale, rosy complexions were idolized, symbolizing a life untouched by physical labor, while makeup was considered vulgar, associated with actresses and sex workers rather than respectable women. By the time the 1920s arrived, that vision of beauty had been completely overturned. The world had just emerged from World War I, a global conflict that upended society and left a generation of young women questioning everything they had been taught. Many had stepped into the workforce while men were away at war, proving their capability outside of the home. They had lost brothers, fathers, and fiancés in battle, and the idea of returning to a life of quiet subservience felt not only outdated but insulting. The world was changing, and nowhere was the shift more evident than in the way women began to present themselves. The flapper aesthetic wasn't just a trend, it was a political statement. Every element of the flapper's appearance was an act of rebellion against the rigid beauty ideals of the past. The goal was not merely to redefine beauty, but to destroy the old standard entirely. One of the most radical changes was the bob haircut. Women had been expected to grow their hair long for centuries, but flappers chopped it off without hesitation. This wasn't just about convenience, it was a deliberate rejection of traditional femininity, and the bob was seen as a boyish, defiant, and even scandalous. Some young women were reportedly disowned by their families for cutting their hair, as it was perceived as an outright rejection of their respected roles as wives and mothers. Alongside short hair came a transformation of body ideals. While the Victorian and Edwardian eras had idolized the hourglass figure, flappers embraced a flat, boyish silhouette. Corsets were discarded in favor of loose, straight-cut dresses that allowed for movement and comfort. Some women even bound their chests to minimize their curves, creating a more androgynous look. The soft, exaggerated femininity of their mother's generation was seen as restrictive and impractical. Flappers wanted freedom, not just in their social lives, but in the way they dressed and moved. I mean, that would have been really scandalous at the time if you consider for hundreds of years they had long hair and then suddenly chopped it off. And makeup, once considered improper for respectable women, became a symbol of modernity and defiance. Flappers applied their makeup in bold, theatrical ways. Thin, penciled-in eyebrows, dark smoky eyes, and deep red lipstick painted into a distinctive Cupid's bow shape. The goal was to look striking, not natural. The fresh-faced, rosy-cheeked Victorian ideal was rejected and favored an artificial, almost doll-like beauty that announced a woman's presence rather than hiding it. Even skin tone became a site of rebellion. While the 19th century had prized pale, delicate skin, the 1920s saw the rise of the suntanned look. Coco Chanel, a pioneering fashion icon, inadvertently popularized tanning after returning home from a Mediterranean vacation with a golden glow. What had once been considered a mark of outdoor laborers now became a sign of leisure, luxury, and modernity, reflecting the flapper's embrace of an active outdoor lifestyle. The Roaring Twenties wasn't just a decade of excess and glamour, it was also an era of radical transformation, and beauty ideals shifted accordingly. One of the biggest influences was the women's rights movement. In 1920, American women finally gained the right to vote, a landmark victory that signified their growing power in society. With this newfound independence, women no longer wanted to conform to the demure, passive ideals of the past. The flapper aesthetic became the visual representation of this freedom. Shorter hemlines, shorter hair, and a bold, confident attitude that rejected the notion that a woman's primary role was to be soft, gentle, and invisible. The economic boom of the 1920s also played a major role in reshaping beauty standards. Unlike the frugal, conservative Victorian era, the Roaring Twenties was a time of prosperity, nightlife, and indulgence. Women were entering the workforce in greater numbers, earning their own money and spending it on themselves, whether they meant buying makeup, fashionable clothing, or indulging in the new social scenes of jazz clubs and speakeasies. Beauty became about pleasure, fun, and personal expression, rather than about pleasing men or adhering to rigid societal expectations. Hollywood, too, played a significant role in shaping the new beauty ideal. Silent film stars like Louise Brooks, Clara Bow, and Theda Bara epitomized the flapper aesthetic with their daring makeup, short hair, and independent personas. Women around the world copied their looks, using newly available mass-produced cosmetics and fashion to emulate the stars of the silver screen. For the first time, beauty was being shaped not just by tradition, but by popular culture, making it more accessible and widely adopted than ever before. And of course, not everyone embraced the new beauty ideal. Older generations were horrified, seeing flappers as reckless, immoral, and even dangerous to society. Newspapers ran articles laminating the death of true womanhood, arguing that short hair and androgynous clothing were making women unattractive and unfeminine. Some critics even warned that flappers would never find husbands, as their bold and independent nature was seen as a threat to traditional marriage and family values. Religious groups and conservative social figures condemned the use of makeup, which was still associated with prostitutes and actresses. Some towns even passed laws against short skirts and excessive makeup in an attempt to rein in the growing rebellion against traditional femininity. But despite the backlash, there was no turning back. The flapper movement had permanently altered beauty standards, proving that beauty was not just about aesthetics, it was about power, freedom, and cultural change. Even after the flapper era ended, its influence never fully disappeared. While the 1930s saw a return to softer, more feminine beauty, the idea that women could shape and redefine beauty on their own terms remained. The flapper rebellion set the stage for every major beauty shift that followed. The 1960s mod era, with its boyish twiggy aesthetic, directly challenged the bombshell beauty of the 50s. The 1990s grunge movement rejected the polished supermodel look of the 80s, embracing a more androgynous heroin chic aesthetic. The 2020s ugly pretty movement, much like the flappers, rejects traditional femininity in favor of unconventional beauty and aesthetic rebellion. Beauty is never just about looks. It is a mirror reflecting society's values, politics, and struggles. And in the 1920s, beauty wasn't just about appearing attractive, it was a weapon against the past, a symbol of defiance, and a declaration of independence. So the next time you see a flapper with her bobbed hair and bold lipstick, remember she wasn't just following a trend. She was breaking the rules, rewriting beauty standards, and leading a revolution. Chapter 2. The 1990s versus the supermodel era, the birth of ugly pretty. By the late 1980s, beauty had reached peak glamour. The decade was defined by excess, big hair, big curves, big money, and nowhere was this more evident than the supermodel era. Women like Cindy Crawford, Claudia Schiffer, Naomi Campbell, and Christy Turlington became the aspirational faces of beauty. These models weren't just mannequins for designer clothing. They were celebrities in their own right, gracing magazine covers, strutting down high fashion runways, and starring in Pepsi commercials that solidified their status as global icons. The ideal beauty of the supermodel era was high maintenance, ultra feminine, and unapologetically sexy. The bronze skin, voluminous blowouts, strong brows, and glossy lips of the 1980s supermodels represented an era where beauty was healthy, powerful, and confident. Supermodels weren't just admired, they were worshipped. They had personalities, signature walks, and a level of untouchable perfection that made them seem almost godlike. Fashion houses like Versace and Chanel embraced this vision, dressing supermodels in luxurious, body-conscious clothing that enhanced their hourglass silhouettes, emphasizing a return to classic femininity and glamour. However, as the decade turned, beauty underwent a drastic transformation. By the early 1990s, the world had become disillusioned with excess and perfectionism of the previous era. The global economy was shifting. The early 90s recession made the over-the-top garish wealth of the 80s feel out of touch. The glitzy, polished supermodel aesthetic was suddenly seen as artificial and unattainable and outdated. People wanted something different, something new, something raw and rebellious and anti-establishment. And so the pendulum swung in the opposite direction, leading to the birth of heroin chic and the rise of what we now call ugly pretty. Heroin chic was a stark contrast to the healthy, curvy beauty of the supermodel era. Instead of radiant, glowing skin and sculpted bodies, the new ideal was waifish, pale, and almost ghostly. Enter Kate Moss, the ultimate anti-supermodel. At just 5'7", short by modeling standards, she was thin to the point of fragility, with sunken eyes, barely there lips, and a bony frame that made her look like she had stepped out of a moody underground art film rather than a glossy magazine spread. She became the face of Calvin Klein's minimalist, stripped-down aesthetic, which embraced a gritty, almost androgynous vision of beauty. Makeup followed suit. Gone were the bold red lips and bronze cheeks of the 80s bombshells. Instead, the 1990s embraced minimalism with barely there lips, thinly drawn brows, and hollowed out cheekbones. The heroin chic look was deliberately disheveled, undone, and effortless. Models looked as though they had just rolled out of bed, chain smoked a pack of cigarettes, and hadn't slept in days. There was an element of recklessness and self-destruction that made this beauty ideal feel dangerous, edgy, and rebellious. Fashion followed this dark aesthetic shift. Grunge culture dominated both the music and fashion industries, introducing a style that was disheveled, unpolished, and purposely anti-glamour. Designers like Marc Jacobs and Alexander McQueen pushed the new vision of beauty, sending models down the runway in oversized, distressed clothing that looked like it had been stolen from the thrift store. The goal wasn't to enhance curves or highlight femininity, it was to look unbothered, almost apathetic, to the idea of beauty itself. At its core, heroin chic wasn't just a style. It was a cultural rebellion. It was also a direct reaction to the over-the-top consumerism and perfection of the 80s, and the recession of the early 90s made glitz and glamour feel tone-deaf, and alternative subcultures rejected the polished, overproduced beauty standards that had dominated the previous decade. Just as the 20 flappers rebelled against the rigid beauty norms of the Victorian era, the 1990s grunge aesthetic rejected the hyper-feminine, larger-than-life beauty of the supermodel era. Beyond fashion, the rise of indie and alternative culture reshaped what was considered beautiful. Mainstream Hollywood films were replaced with independent cinema, where actors and actresses didn't always fit the traditional beauty mold. Directors like Quentin Tarantino and Sofia Coppola embraced a more raw, understated aesthetic, casting actors who didn't have the chiseled, symmetrical features of past generations. This shift from glossy Hollywood perfection to a more authentic look helped further normalize the idea that beauty wasn't about being flawless, it was about having a character, uniqueness, and even a little messiness. Photography also plays a major role in pushing the heroin chic aesthetic. Unlike the heavily airbrushed, brightly lit magazine covers of the 80s, the 90s saw the rise of gritty, raw photography. Fashion photographers like Corinne Day and Jürgen Teller shot models in harsh lighting with minimal makeup and intentionally unglamorous settings. The idea was to capture beauty in its most unfiltered, unpolished state, making it feel more real and relatable, but also a little more unsettling. Of course, just like the flapper movement of the 20s, heroin chic and ugly pretty weren't without their controversies. Critics pointed out that heroin chic glorified unhealthy body ideals, promoting extreme thinness, pale skin, and almost a sickly appearance as aspirational. The fashion industry faced backlash for allegedly romanticizing drug addiction, particularly in advertisements that featured models looking dazed, fragile, and on the brink of collapse. By the late 90s, the pendulum began to swim back, and the backlash against heroin chic led to the return of a healthier, more athletic body ideal of the early 2000s. But while heroin chic may have faded, the concept of ugly pretty never disappeared. The idea that beauty can be unconventional, disheveled, or even unsettling has continued to influence aesthetics in the 21st century. Today's weird girl aesthetic, the rise of bleached brows, asymmetrical features, and messy undone styling all trace their roots back to the heroin chic rebellion of the 90s. The 90s taught us that beauty is cyclical. When one extreme dominates, another one rises to challenge it. Just as the supermodel era gave way to heroin chic, and heroin chic gave way to the hyper-glamorous beauty standards of the 2000s, today we are witnessing another major shift. The current divide between hyper-perfection and unconventional, almost ugly beauty echoes the very same battle that took place in the 90s. So while Kate Moss may have been the face of heroin chic, her influence is still everywhere, from the runways of Balenciaga and Rick Owens to the viral TikTok trend celebrating effortless cool girl beauty. The spirit of ugly pretty lives on, proving once again that beauty isn't just about looking good, it's about challenging the status quo. Chapter 3, the 2020s, Beauty's New Civil War, Perfection versus Ugly Beauty. Beauty has always been cyclical, swinging from one extreme to another. Today we are witnessing yet another shift, one that feels more like a civil war than a simple trend evolution. On one side, we have the clean girl aesthetic, an image of hyper-perfection that emphasizes glowing skin, perfectly symmetrical features, and a luxurious but understated style. This look is effortless in appearance, but requires meticulous grooming, expensive skincare routines, and often cosmetic enhancements to achieve. Think Hailey Bieber, Bella Hadid, and Sophia Richie, all of whom embody an aesthetic that is minimalist but undeniably polished. The clean girl look represents aspirational femininity in its most refined form, subtle, sophisticated, and controlled. It is an aesthetic built on discipline, reflecting a carefully curated image of beauty that is wealthy, healthy, and quietly unattainable. On the other side, however, there's a growing embrace of ugly pretty, where beauty is no longer about perfection, but about character, uniqueness, and deliberate imperfection. This movement challenges traditional beauty ideals by embracing quirks rather than concealing them. Bleached eyebrows, messy hairstyles, unkept bangs, and asymmetrical features have become desirable, creating an aesthetic that feels deliberately chaotic and undone. Unlike the clean girl aesthetic, which demands an almost obsessive level of upkeep, ugly pretty feels unapologetically raw and effortless. It thrives on individuality and rebellion against the sameness of mainstream beauty. And the rise of ugly pretty can be seen everywhere, from the reemergence of indie sleaze fashion to the popularity of unconventional models like Devon Aoki and Ellen Emhoff, who deviate from the symmetrical beauty standards that once dominated the industry. Celebrities like Julia Fox have become poster figures for this movement, with her darkly smudged eyes, dramatic styling, and overall rejection of the hyper-curated image of celebrity beauty. Instead of striving for flawlessness, ugly pretty thrives on imperfection, weirdness, and unpredictability. It is a look that doesn't just allow for flaws, it celebrates them. And this divide in beauty ideals didn't happen in isolation. The internet and social media have played a crucial role in the rise of both hyper-perfection and its rejection. In the early days of Instagram and YouTube beauty culture, there was a collective push towards aesthetic perfection. Influencers and celebrities alike promoted a version of beauty that was airbrushed, contoured, and carefully edited. Facetune, fillers, and filters blurred imperfections and created a homogenized look, where everyone from influencers to everyday users began to resemble one another. The Instagram face phenomenon, popularized by celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Kylie Jenner, became the blueprint for modern beauty, emphasizing plump lips, high cheekbones, and almond-shaped eyes and sculpted features. However, as the 2020s progressed, beauty fatigue set in, and the rise of TikTok and Gen Z's influence on digital culture accelerated a backlash against the overly curated, polished aesthetic of the Instagram beauty. Unlike previous generations, who had been raised on the glossy perfection of magazines and celebrity culture, Gen Z grew up in an era where beauty was constantly filtered, edited, and performative. As a result, there has been an increasing push towards authenticity and individuality. Even if that means embracing what was once considered ugly, the rejection of hyper-perfection isn't just a trend, it's a reaction to the overwhelming sameness of modern beauty. Beyond social media, feminism and gender-fluid beauty movements have also played a significant role in reshaping what is considered attractive. The traditional beauty standard has long been centered around hyper-feminine, sexy, and symmetrical features, but in recent years those standards have been challenged. The rise of androgyny and gender-neutral fashion has led to a greater acceptance of unconventional beauty. Beauty that doesn't fit neatly into male or female categories but exists in a space that is fluid and open to interpretation. Many young people are actively rejecting traditional beauty ideals because they see them as rooted in outdated gender norms that dictate how women should look and represent themselves. Ugly pretty in this context becomes a form of empowerment, an intentional departure from the beauty ideals that have been historically imposed on women. Economic factors have also influenced this divide in beauty. Just as the 1920s flapper look was a rebellion against Victorian modesty, and the 1990s heroin chic aesthetic rejected the polished supermodel era, today's ugly pretty movement is in many ways a backlash against luxury beauty and quiet wealth aesthetics. The clean girl aesthetic, with its association with high-end skincare, minimalist fashion, and exclusivity, feels inaccessible to many people, especially as inflation and financial instability continue to affect younger generations. The ugly pretty movement, in contrast, is more accessible, DIY, and deliberately unpolished. making it a more attainable form of self-expression. And what makes the 2020s beauty war particularly interesting is that both aesthetics are rooted in the same desire, self-presentation as a form of power and identity. The clean girl aesthetic represents a highly curated, disciplined approach to beauty, where effortlessness is an illusion carefully maintained through skincare routines, cosmetic procedures, and carefully selected aesthetics. Ugly Pretty, on the other hand, is about breaking free from those constraints, refusing to adhere to the idea that beauty must be refined and symmetrical. Yet ironically, both aesthetics require some level of intentionality and performance. Even the most effortless messy look is often still carefully crafted, just as the clean girl aesthetic is often the result of expensive maintenance rather than true simplicity. Ultimately, the battle between hyper-perfection and ugly pretty is a reflection of a larger societal tensions between tradition and rebellion, exclusivity and accessibility, symmetry and asymmetry. Both aesthetics will likely continue to evolve, just as past beauty trends have always shifted in response to cultural, political, and economic changes. The pendulum of beauty will inevitably swing again, perhaps merging the two aesthetics and giving rise to an entirely new standard that we can't predict. As we navigate this beauty divide, one question remains: are we moving towards a future where beauty standards truly become more inclusive? Or are we just cycling through yet another rebellion that will eventually be replaced by the next wave of idealized perfection? The history of beauty tells us that trends will always change, but the desire to define and redefine beauty will never go away. Whether one aligns with the clean girl aesthetic or embraces ugly pretty, the power of beauty remains its ability to reflect, challenge, and ultimately shape the culture of its time. If history has taught us anything, it's that beauty standards are never static. They don't simply evolve in a linear fashion. They react, they rebel, and they're often a swing between extremes. Just as the boys' androgynous flapper look of the 20s was followed by the ultra-feminine cinch waist beauty of the 50s, and just as the skeletal heroine chic of the 90s was later replaced by the curvy, hyper-glamorous Instagram beauty of the 2010s. It's only a matter of time before we see yet another shift. But what will it be? Will we move back towards traditional classic beauty ideals, or are we headed into something entirely new? One possibility is a return to hyperfemininity, similar to what happened in the aftermath of the Flapper Rebellion. As much as society pushes against old beauty norms, there is always a counter-movement that pulls people back towards traditional aesthetics. We are already seeing hints of this with the resurgence of vintage beauty influences, such as old Hollywood-inspired makeup, structured silhouettes, and a newfound appreciation of timeless, elegant beauty. With the rise of AI-generated beauty, face symmetry obsession, and the digital perfection of beauty influencers, the demand for polished, ultra-feminine beauty may make a comeback, offering an alternative to the raw, rebellious, and unconventional aesthetics currently gaining traction. However, there is another possibility, one that we haven't fully seen before. Instead of beauty swinging back to a dominant ideal, we may be entering a new era where multiple beauty aesthetics coexist without a singular standard ruling them all. With the internet democratizing beauty and social media allowing subcultures to thrive, we are witnessing a shift where beauty tribes can exist side by side rather than replacing one with another. The clean girl aesthetic, the ugly pretty are already competing for dominance, but rather than one erasing the other, both contribute to hold influence, appealing to different sensibilities. This could be the beginning of a true plurality of beauty, where trends are less about strict ideals and more about individual identity and personal choice. Regardless of where beauty trends go next, one thing remains clear: beauty is never just about aesthetics. It has always been intertwined with culture, rebellion, and identity, serving as a reflection of the political, social, and economic forces shaping each era. Whether we are witnessing the death of perfection or simply another cycle in the endless loop of beauty reinvention, only time will tell. But one thing is certain: beauty will continue to evolve, surprise us, and challenge our perceptions of what it means to be attractive. So what do you think? Are we on the brink of a new beauty revolution, or will we find ourselves repeating history yet again? Let me know in the comments below. I'm kind of over the whole clean girl aesthetic, to be honest. It is exhausting, so this ugly pretty thing seems kind of interesting to me. Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.